Thank you. Thank you very much. So what did you think? Pretty nice, huh? Is it any wonder that it was nominated for an Oscar? Come on. Well, this is our opportunity to talk a little bit about the behind the scenes and what went into the film. And I'm joined, as you know, by John Hoffman and Arlo Washington, the star of the film. So I'm going to start off talking about the genesis, thinking about the genesis of the film. And John, you and your co-director, Christine Turner, I believe, were influenced by the book The Color of Money, which inspired you to want to make a film about the racial wealth gap. So talk about the process and what it was that brought you to the door of this gentleman.
Well, yes, this is a book, The Color of Money, by a woman named Mersa Baradaran, and it's about the history of black banking in this country since Reconstruction. The book proceeds to describe a series of failures by the federal government to create any kind of opportunity for the black community and any kind of opportunity for black financial institutions to build and to grow and to thrive. The only thing that she does point to as a successful decision or act by the federal government was the creation of the CDFI program under Clinton. And Christine and I did not know about CDFIs until we read about them in this book, started researching them, and this world opened up to us in our research, and it seemed like it was filled with storytelling potential. When we started examining the media landscape, we saw that no films had ever been made about CDFIs. And then a friend who worked at the Clinton Foundation for many years told us that President Clinton was going to have a conversation with Donna Gambrell about the creation of this program. Donna was the first administrator of the CDFI program. And it was a wonderful conversation. It was kind of a love fest between the two of them. And so we wrote to Donna, introducing ourselves and this opportunity that we had to make the film. And we had the generous support of Mass Mutual Foundation, of PayPal, and the Andrew Niku Foundation, and one of our executive producers, Jules Ho, is here. Dennis refused to take a credit of executive producer. He didn't think it was right, but in our mind, he's an executive producer. Donna, we said, Donna, look, we are very intrigued by this world, and if you agree that there's a lot of storytelling potential, we would love to embed for upwards of a year in a black-owned CDFI. And so she said, well, I have an idea. There's a young man in Little Rock, Arkansas. His name is Arlo Washington. He's a barber, and he has a barber college, and he has a shipping container in the parking lot of his barber college, and where he has opened a CDFI. And she was a big fan of Arlo's, and we said, can you introduce us? And we started Zooming with Arlo, and immediately felt that we had to go down and visit and meet Arlo, meet his wife Debony, and start this conversation about what it means to bring cameras into their lives, into the Barber College, into the offices of People Trust, and into their home. So
great. And Arlo, to that point, who first approached you about the film before you talked to John? And talk about your initial reaction to what John just described, having cameras descend upon your life, basically, and begin to document everything that you're doing.
Well, I received an email from Donna Gambrell asking me, telling me about John and Christine and what they were wanting to do. And then John, we got on an email thread and set a day for a Zoom, and that's that's how it all happened. And initially, when I got the email, I was thinking like, no, I don't want to do a film and exploit the community and be looked at and lose the trust that we had already worked so hard to build. with our community members. And so, but then we thought about it, and I was thinking about when I used to go to banks and talk about CDFIs and talk about, try to explain what the acronym means and what we do. I was like, well, maybe this would be helpful to be able to, have an explainer video, movie to be able to show as a precursor before we actually go and meet to talk about, investments. And so, and I was like, well, then also it would be good because, CDFIs, I felt like need that recognition, that that information needed to be shared with the community at large because most communities don't know about CDFIs, what they do, how to access, and I just felt like there would be something to put it out there and educate communities that didn't know.
Wonderful. Did you feel you had to, or did you set any conditions?
Yes, we talked about it with my wife, talked about it with the staff, talked about it, and all these different things. Is like, well, so, and everybody was like, well, they felt the way that I did, that it would be something that would be helpful.
Good.
And could be used as a tool to be able to educate.
Wonderful. And so that brings up the whole notion of trust. And so, John, as a filmmaker, one of your initial challenges is, okay, now I've got to go into this community and I have to engender trust. How do you do that, and how does that fuel your ability to do storytelling effectively?
Well, in the world of documentaries, there is no film, there is no documentary without trust. It's entirely built on a trust relationship. And so we had, Christina and I and our producer Christina, had to really win Arlo and Debonese and the staff, everyone's trust. One of the things that distinguishes a film like this from something like 60 Minutes is that this is not investigative. Mm-hmm. Where there's no gotcha. There's nothing that is this relationship that investigative journalists have to have with the people that they are spending time with or profiling. This was a collaboration between everyone. Our team, the cinematographer, that had to be able to spend time in all these environments with Christine and myself, out of earshot often. Mm-hmm. And he had to move in a way that made people forget he was there.
Right.
But it really came down to everyone in Arlo's universes trusting us because Arlo trusted us. That the staff and the family are here. They, because Arlo was trusting, that was able to extend to their comfort with the cameras being there. And then it's the people coming in that are applying for loans, or the people getting their haircut, the students in the Barber College. It really all emanated from Arlo's comfort with us being there and how that then spread.
So flip the equation, Arlo, and talk about, from your perspective, you're trusting this gentleman and his team to tell your story through his lens and through his vision. How did you sort of work through that?
Well, they did a great job of, letting us know that they would keep the integrity level high and that they would just sort of disappear, that they wouldn't be in the way. Because that was my main concern, to make sure that while we were fulfilling our mission and doing what we do every day, that, it didn't get in the way of our operations. And so, they told us that they would be in the room, but we wouldn't know that they were in the room. Right. And that's exactly what happened. We didn't know, what when you're in a moment and somebody's in there in need and you're responding and trying to figure out, a way to help, you're not really thinking about it. So not only did they disappear, but they also disappear in your mind. And then the community members that we were helping, when people needed help, they just didn't care about it. It's like, well, we just need help.
It sounds like, in some ways, it's almost like a high wire act, because you are telling the story of a community, but you have to be very careful. There are guardrails, obviously. You have to be very careful that you're not exploiting the community, any one individual in that community. Talk about how you do that, John.
I don't know what it is, except that you just have to respect everybody that you're having on camera. And there's a term of sort of searching for an essential truth. One of the things, there's 450 hours of material that get condensed down, distilled down to 35 minutes here. So to make a film like this requires a lot of time, both in terms of how many days you're shooting, but you also want to have a sense of time elapsing. We wanted to follow the money. We wanted to see how the loans that People Trust is making, impact people's lives. And so we were there, quite often over almost a year's time. And one of the things that I can sort of unpack for all of you is the last shoot. So the last shoot that we did were the interviews that you see here. We had all this material, but there were some very important aspects of the stories of the people's lives, but the lived experience in the Black community in Little Rock that we wanted to hear people talking about. And we felt that in the year's time that we had been filming, that we had developed enough of a trust with some of the people that we had spent a lot of time and we had a lot of material with, some of the staff who were here. And we felt that the technique that's often used in documentaries of having talking heads of experts, we felt that rather than going to the academics and traveling to the universities and having them talk about the racial wealth gap, we had people who were very expert that had this lived experience in Little Rock. And so that led to this decision to do these interviews and asking everyone you saw on camera the same very small set of questions. And we could not have done that at the beginning of the film.
Right.
We could not have done that in the middle of the making of the film. That only could have happened after spending a year's time with them getting to know us. But the other thing that had to be considered was who's asking the questions. Christine is a Black woman, I'm a white man. And we made the decision that not obviously, but we made the decision that Christine is the person who should do those interviews. And I wasn't there. I went out and I was doing all the drone work that you see in the film while Christine was doing those interviews. And it was important for the people who were on camera, some of them are here, to really feel that that was a very safe environment for them to speak, their truth to a lot of, very, very difficult questions that we were asking.
Right. It's a beautiful film, obviously, and I think one of the things that excited us at the Mass Mutual Foundation, and I know Jules and I have talked about this, is there's a positivity to it. I mean, you're talking about something that has its roots. The roots of the problem are in some pretty bad stuff, injustices in the past, but you focus and you made it positive. And Arlo, I'll never forget this. You said to me, I think it was when we first met in Indianapolis, and we were just talking off the cuff, and we were talking about the film, and you said to me, Dennis, I don't look back. I'm just looking forward.
Yeah.
And that comes through. So talk a little bit about that, because I think, that one statement that you said to me has stuck with me ever since, and I think will stay with me.
Yeah.
And it comes through loud and clear in the film. So first to you, Arlo, you talk about it, and then I think, John, as a filmmaker, I'd like you to talk about it.
Absolutely. I mean, you can't move forward looking back, and I look at, we talk about, and we mentioned it's a never-ending story, right? You hear it's like a rerun. It's like, well, you can see the problem. We know the problem. We know the problem is access to credit and access to capital, access to opportunity. So I've always been a driven person to be able to create solutions whenever there's a problem, and not taking no for an answer. So that prompted me to be able to create something that would be able to help the community to be able to have access. going back to 2009 when Arkansas banned predatory payday lending, and then being in the community for so many years, being embedded in the community, the community members came to the Barber College. They were going to business owners. They were going to whoever they could, family members if they could. And so I felt like, well, the community members have been supporting our business. We should be able to come up with a solution to be able to provide for our community members that need access. And so that's when, the community development financial institution idea, through, I was making loans to people, and I was like, well, that's not sustainable, because I'm just going to my pocket coming out with loans, and I'm like, it's 100 here, 100 there, 150 over here. We need to create a fund. So something that would be able to, and then formalize the transactions so that the community members can learn, be educated on working with a financial institution. And then also, we should be able to help them to be able to climb out of the pit that they're in by reporting credit on their credit report to help them. If credit is an asset and take credit to get credit, you can't go to, there's no credit stores in the neighborhood. So if we can provide that piece, then we would be able to help our community members be able to build better lives for themselves, for their families, and then create opportunities.
That forward movement.
Yeah, forward. Yeah. Let's push forward. If there's a way in this CDFI, financial institutions is the way for these communities to be able to, it's a mechanism, they're the middleman, to be able to facilitate transactions that large institutions just don't have the time or may not see that that's profitable to be able to do, but somebody got to do it. Everybody has to eat.
Yep, exactly. John, your thoughts about the tone of the film and the intentionality behind that?
Well, I'm glad you feel it, and I hope the audience felt that. It's a commitment that I have as a filmmaker, that the stories I want to tell, the problems I want to confront, I want to find ways to offer solutions to. If I'm going to shine a light on a problem, if there are solutions that can be pointed to, then I want to make those kinds of films. There are so many documentaries that are made about problems for which we don't have solutions. Mm-hmm. And it's important to elevate awareness of that problem. I just choose to focus on problems that I can point to solutions for. And when, going back to the beginning, when I talked about The Color of Money and how it singled out CDFIs as the only thing that the federal government has done that has any sort of sustainability and is proven to be changing the economic health of communities, not only that, but obviously people's lives, then that was something that interested us. And we were, we took a flyer on going and spending time in People Trust, but we truly believed that we were gonna, if we spent enough time there, that true life, real life was gonna offer stories where we were gonna see how, when people do have access to capital, what happens. And so I hope that you felt that came through.
And so to that end, just talk briefly about the power of storytelling and why storytelling is so important.
Well, I think that we're wired for it.
Yeah.
So if you just think about our own evolution, we gathered and we told stories. It's how we learned. It's how we learned about how to pass on knowledge and information. Mm-hmm. So I think we're just hardwired to respond to stories and to emotional stories. It's how we remember.
Sure.
It's really how memory works. So I just think that if the goal is to change people's behavior, at the end of the day, if we're trying to change behaviors, you have to change hearts and minds, to change behavior. And how do you get to the heart but with storytelling?
Well, we know the storytelling worked because the three of us and Jules went to the Oscars last year.
We did.
Or this year, whenever. It's all a blur. So Arlo, I want you to talk about it. You were on the red carpet. I saw you being interviewed by, All Sort Entertainment Tonight or whoever.
Yeah.
Talk about that experience, and were there any surprises in that experience? I mean, obviously gave you great exposure, and it gave the topic great exposure. But what was your experience like with all that?
Well, you mentioned about the storytelling, right? I had to learn how to tell a story in 60 seconds.
Exactly right.
And then being on a world stage and then also having the opportunity to be able to share about community development, financial institutions, and lifting up in that moment, it was just amazing to me. It felt really surreal. And being there with Dwayne Wade and Gabrielle Union and then just that whole, seeing Arnold Schwarzenegger and Danny DeVito, all these people, I was like, man. And it was just amazing. I felt like, what started off as, something that we did to be able to highlight CDFIs, making it to the Oscars, and the subject matter being, on that platform, it just really I felt proud.
Well, I definitely think, Arlo, that I'm like you. I don't know where John is, but when we got into this, we were never thinking about the Oscars at the end.
Exactly.
But there we were, and it was really quite something. I'm going to ask you both the same question, and then we'll go to the audience to see if there are any questions out there. Talk about just what do you take away from this experience, this film, everything that's happened around it? What are some of the key things that you've taken away from this? I'll start with Arlo, and then we'll conclude with John.
The film, it really got our community members, and it found out that what affects Little Rock affects the whole world. I've got emails from London, from Belgium, from Kenya, all over the place, and hey, we saw the film, and it showed me that, really understanding what the mission is of your CDFI is important, and being able to explain that in a way that is with clarity and that's palatable so that everybody can digest the information is important. And I was happy that, that's what the film did, and it's able to be, used in many ways. So that's what I took away from it.
Well, you're a great messenger, for sure.
Thank you.
John, yourself.
Well, I loved every aspect of making this film. I loved everything about it. And I think that the team would agree with me. And the friendship with Arlo, his family, his coworkers, these will endure. I just know that they will. And so that's what I take with me, because it has touched my heart, and they've touched my heart. But being here and being in this room and being at this conference and knowing that this is a film that can be of use in building CDFIs, building capacity, using it to lobby for more funds for CDFIs. I mean, if it is seen as a tool that can be used to grow this movement, then that's a remarkable measure of its success, and it's better than the Oscar.
Fantastic.
Yes, absolutely.
Fantastic. All right. I'm going to look to the audience now to see if we have any questions. I think there may be some microphones out here. We've got the lights turned up. Here we go.
I'll go.
Raymond.
How are you? I'm well. How are you?
Very well, thank you.
Nice to meet all of you. Your story, Arlo, I'm sure resonates with most of the people in this room about what motivated you. But how did you stumble across CDFIs? What connect that dot for us, please?
Yes. So we were making loans, and I had a relative to come and get a haircut that was from Chicago. And he was a security guard at a CDFI. And so when he came down and he saw that we were making loans and that we were, and how we were doing, he said, "Have you ever heard of CDFIs?" Well, CDFI, what is that? And then he said, "Well, you could go to cdfifund.gov and look it up." And so I went and looked it up, and I looked at the requirements and the applications. I was like, nah, we don't mess with that right now. So we put it out for about 2 years, and then as the demand, but little did we know, predatory payday lending was banned, and 200,000 Arkansans were utilizing the services, but they didn't come back with a safer alternative. So everybody was looking at us as the go-to at that point, and so. That's like, we would probably start looking at this application again. So then we, then got with one of my administrators, and we just really just drilled down and started really capturing a lot of the data to be able to make an application. And after about a year, then we were able to, we had enough data to submit and make an application, so. It was Shore Bank.
Great. We'll go to the left side now. Harold.
Hello. So I love this. Love films, love filmmaking, and naturally love films about us, right? I got a bunch of questions, but John, I got a couple for you. So with that much footage and knowing the intimacy of hearing stories and everything else, and you noted having to cut down, I think you said over 400 hours into this half an hour sort of segment. Are there two questions? One, are there any story or any elements that you felt was like a significant part of the storytelling that you actually didn't pull out or wasn't able to because of some of the constraints, but you think is critical to the story and the impact that Arlo and the team is having? Second, there's so much more that can be told. And if you have any perspective or insights about, specifically for Arlo, but generally for our industry, what are ways that we can use the broad impact of narrative telling and storytelling to tell our story different so that we can change hearts and minds, like you mentioned?
Well, I'll answer the second question first. I mean, the stories are there. I mean, I have to imagine that everyone in this room and everyone at this conference that is doing the work that you all are doing, that if you were imagining that a camera could follow, the lives of the people who you're working with, that you would believe that, you're seeing, you were probably seeing many people in this film. So I think that this is not the only storytelling medium. This is an expensive, time-consuming medium, but there are so many ways of telling stories, whether it is, that they're written stories, they're podcasts, they're radio interviews, radio documentaries. So I just think that if there is I know that there was a conference today, a seminar today on storytelling. I think that to just trust that you are sitting on a gold mine. I mean, there are many, in every community, there's a gold mine of stories to be told. And I think that for people to feel honored by having their stories told, and that their lives are really worthy of that kind of attention is a great way of respecting people. So that's a way of answering that. So I just would encourage you to just believe that there's so many ways to tell stories, and the technology is so accessible to do it. In terms of what stories didn't we get a chance to tell? I mean, there's so much more to the people that you saw on camera, the people that you met, that we couldn't include. There's fantastic stuff of Arlo's kids and time with them. And we had to make the hard decision to not have that be another thread, Arlo and the family life. But it's a fantastic family.
Thank you.
There's a lot of humor in that family, a lot of laughter.
Thank you.
We were able to capture it. So Someday maybe we'll tell the story of the Washingtons.
Oh, wow.
Awesome. Yes, sir.
Yeah, so there's a story that will be a sequel that I know Arlo has engaged in. Arlo has done something that's very rare and very powerful alongside the Community Development Loan Fund. Starting about 2 years ago, he organized a community development credit union. And there are only about 2 or 3 other examples of that. Community First in Pennsylvania is one of them. Lakota is another one. But the combination of a credit union to take people's deposits alongside the loan is, I think, the most powerful thing. And I would love to see you do a sequel of that chapter in your work.
Oh, wow. Thanks, Chris. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Hi. Harold kind of took my question, but I think we could kind of go back to it. I'm curious, Arlo, if you had, another hour of movie that you could decide what to put in, what else would you include? What people you work with, other businesses, anything? Curious.
I would include what happens to a business when it has adequate capital. How they're able to, and then ongoing technical assistance and mentoring to help them to be able to grow their business. Because what we've seen is job creation and businesses popping up in Little Rock like no other, and opportunity that wouldn't otherwise be there. I would like to also talk about the importance of who has, generational wealth and generational poverty, and the gap in how the experience with money for someone that has experienced generational poverty, and then the experience with handling money with somebody that's experienced generational wealth is 2 totally different ends of the spectrum. And so, having financial institutions that understand that and has a culturally conscious approach and understanding of that, I think that's one of the things that I would, like to highlight. And how important CDFIs are as well, to communities.
Yes, ma'am.
I am very, very full. I got to be honest. I was very touched by what we all witnessed. And so I thank you, Arlo. Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. I'm trying to collect my emotions because as a Black woman, I understand our community. And so what I feel runs deep, and I don't hide that, no matter where I am. I want to say to those who may not understand, our community is deeply impacted by words sometimes that are inarticulable. And I was sharing with someone today that I work with that if the people who are supposed to help other people don't know their story, will be gratified by checking off a box. And we are more than boxes.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I think about, is it Highway 630? Is that what it is?
I-630.
I-630.
Yes.
Now here's the thing. That is still there, but it's representative of where we are now. We're still divided by highways. You can call that highway whatever you want to call it. So the question is, do we really want to find a resolve? When will we break down the barriers and give a community a chance? When people come to us, will we stop thinking in their mind that they're not going to pay us back? When will we be vulnerable enough to take time to know their story? You understood their story. And I feel like your story just became an extension. And that's why you were able to break through. I'm just wondering, in all the wonderful work we're doing, when do we really break through? When do we break down the bridges? When do we stop checking our boxes? When do we stop saying that everything is okay and it's not okay? We can feel that in the atmosphere even now, the climate that we are in. It's not okay. And so with that, I'm just going to ask you, Arlo, the hard question.
Sure.
How do we break down the bridges? Thanks.
You break down the bridges by creating community development financial institutions where there are not financial institutions, where institutions are, because you need to think about it. Financial transactions, I want to tell a story. A young lady, when people can see their transactions, that's so important. When I told this story to a few people, but one of our members of our credit union came in, and she's unbanked, never had a checking account, and her mom never had a checking account, her grandmother never had a checking account, and so she's never experienced, looking at a statement, a bank statement, or getting a direct deposit, or even using online banking. And so she opened up a checking account because she had a job and she wanted to get a direct deposit. And she sent me a message on Messenger, and it was a screenshot of her online banking platform, our online banking, but it was her account. And she asked me, she said, can you explain this to me? Can you tell me what is this? And I said, well, that's a picture of your account on the online banking. She said, well, there's some money in there. And she said, is that my money? And I said, yeah, that's your direct deposit. And she was like, well, can I have some of it? Can I come get some of it? And so I said, yeah, that's your money. And so what that told me was that, again, going back to when you talk about bridges, CDFIs are the bridges that can bridge. I say we talk about closing the gap, but we fill the gap. We fill the gap where there is economic disparity. And so I just believe, like, when there are CDF, if the more people know about CDFIs, the more lenders we can have in the community, then the more opportunity it will be available. Mission-driven lenders.
Great. Yes, sir.
I want to echo this woman's sentiments. I, too, am deeply moved. Arlo, I had the opportunity to meet you, albeit very briefly, in the lobby earlier today. And you are a shining example, and this film shows it, of someone who's fully walking in their passion and purpose.
Thank you. Thank you.
And you can tell the personality and the leadership style of a leader by how they interact with their team. And I've been watching from afar the energy and the love that you and your teammates have for one another. And for them to also be a part of this moment with you is just absolutely amazing.
Thank you.
And there are several inner city Little Rocks around the country, or around the world for that matter. And your profession and how you've leveraged that to build trust within the community. I think about my childhood barbershop, and growing up as a child from a single parent mom, and my barber was my friend, he was my mentor, he was my advisor, he was my teacher, he was like a step uncle. And I love the way that you have used your professional platform to build that trust and allow brothers to be transparent and humble in that space with you. The part of the film that struck me the most as a African-American man was the two brothers who had the opportunity in the middle of the shop to look one-to-one and have an honest eye-to-eye conversation, because we don't do that enough. So there's several things that I can go on and say, but to get to my question, you mentioned in your earlier comments that you receive emails from people around the world who have seen the film.
Yeah.
My question is, as a result of this exposure of the documentary, obviously the Oscar nomination, et cetera, has there been any energy or enthusiasm around having any international screenings of the film, one, and then two, is there any opportunity or is there any energy around there being CDFI equivalents in an international space? So, and that may be a question for Harold, but yeah. But
well, I mean, we've had, and thank you for your question, and thank you for your comments. I really appreciate that. The film was viewed internationally in these places, Kenya, London, Belgium, all these different places. And the emails that I received was, you know, we need something like what you're doing in Little Rock. We need that in our communities. And how do I start up a loan fund? You know, how do we, you know, can you explain that to me? Can you tell me the steps, and how do we create a financial institution? Because we need access to capital, we need access to opportunity as well. And so that is what I've been experiencing in the conversations we've been having, just helping community members be able to mobilize and create something that could be helpful.
Great.
Thank you.
Got time for one more question?
So, hey, Dennis, really quickly, just
Go
to
ahead.
say, so interestingly enough, there actually are CDFIs in the UK. And there's an organization called Responsible Finance that's based in the UK. That's a bit of our kind of peer or sister institution. The CEO just maybe 3 weeks ago reached out to connect because they are CDFIs that are in the UK. Amazing. And it's a smaller network, but committed to the same values and principles that we are here in the States.
Amazing.
And so there is something that I think this kind of message and the power behind it can actually be a bridge to help connect our work to international spaces.
Thank you.
So we're at time, but if we can go quickly, we'll take these last two questions. That'd be great. We'll start right over here.
Great, thank you. I was particularly moved by Arlo talking about his mother. And he said, my mother provided such a great example of humanity and of having compassion and understanding that life circumstances happen, and when they happen, that people need compassion, people need restoration, people need rehabilitation, people need love. And as a two-part question, Arlo, how have you shared the story of your mother in order to help build a movement behind your work? And then, John, you had talked about having other people tell the stories of these business owners. I'd love you to reflect on having the business owners tell their own stories.
Thank you for your question. Thank you for sharing. My mother was a social worker, and I watched my mother, many nights, get up in the middle of the night and go pick up kids that was about to be put into the system and bring them to our house, and then they would stay until they were placed. And also I watched my mother in the community working with, she would braid hair in the community. That's the first person I saw doing, hair. And she would braid the, neighbors' hair. She had friends, she was all about community. And so, thinking back on that really helps keep me grounded and connected to this work, because I feel like that it's a purpose. And that's how I share the story. Now, it's relatable. I can relate to, life situations and circumstances happening. And when they happen, then, you just have to, you have to find a solution. You have to figure it out and find a way, and that's pretty much how I share that.
I think that having community members tell their stories is a very important perspective to add into this overall conversation about storytelling. And there are so many ways to do that. But people, whether it's people keeping a journal about the experience as they're, on the receiving end of a CDFI loan, and documenting their experience, there's tremendous potential with what could be done with that material in terms of what CDFIs are doing and how those stories can be told in the community. I just want to go back to the question about the distribution. So the film is on New Yorker, it can be watched on the New Yorker's website, but the New Yorker put the film on YouTube. So because we want to have no barrier to entry. So, if you want to tell people about this film, just steer people to YouTube so they can watch it. There have been, 600,000 or 700,000 views of the film on YouTube. It's just fantastic.
Great. Our final question.
Yeah, Arlo, you're in a room filled with fellow economic justice warriors, right?
Yeah.
So the love is all here. But I want to talk about the community, ask you about the community, this community, your community.
Yeah.
Take us back to June 2022. Is that when you started this film?
Yes. Well,
Okay.
it was in 2020, yeah, it was 22.
Okay. We all know what it's like to go through the joys and the frustrations, the heartache and the triumphs of doing this mission work. What was going on behind the scenes back then with people trust? What was keeping you up at night? What were the challenges? What were you trying to, make happen and use all this great intellectual capital you have here to move that vision forward? Because we know you're spending a lot of time making that film, but you're running the business 9 to 5.
Absolutely.
Tell us what's going on.
No, I appreciate that. The mission and making sure that the staff understands the mission. Making sure that they understand that, the community that we serve is unbanked, underbanked, and they have to have patience. They're not just a box, but they're people, and we have to develop them if we want to really build a community. And so, every opportunity you get, provide financial education. And then also taking the time to, really give the staff a woosah, having a woosah, and then giving them an opportunity to be able to share. So we would sit around the table and we would talk about it and see what their wellness was like, so that they would be in a strong position to be able to serve the community. And really just reiterating the mission all the time and let them know, hey, look, if you do this work, you're going to heaven.
I want to thank you both. This has been a great discussion. It's great to be back together with the two of you.
Absolutely.
And it's a beautiful film, and we've had a great conversation as a result of that. So thank you all for your attention. Thank you all for participating, and have a wonderful night.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.